All right. Can you please state your name?
Sure, I'm Ed Lasky.
All right. Can you tell us the rank that you were in?
My rank was a specialist or E4.
And what branch of service were you in?
It was in the Army.
Army. Your years served from and to?
I served from 88 until 97.
Okay. Where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Germany twice, once in a town called Firth, and then again in a town called Kitzingen. And I did two tours stateside, one for school in Alabama and another one at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Can you tell us the conditions that you were in Germany?
It was a regular unit. I was in a maintenance company, rear maintenance. I served in missile repair while I was there, and it was a rear-based unit, not a forward or infantry, just a maintenance unit.
Can you tell us some stories that you might have while you were in the service?
Well, sure. I went over to Desert Storm while I was there. And we were there just shy of 6 months. So I just missed getting my combat patch here, or my combat stripe. We have the combat patch, but the combat stripe, you need to be there for 6 months. And so we just missed getting that. And but while I was there, of course, saw a lot of things over in Iraq, and we were part of the 1st Infantry Division while I was there. It actually changed to the 1st Infantry. We started out as the 3rd Infantry Division, and by the time I left Germany, we were part of the 1st ID. We kind of were sent out. We built our own camp, and camps of the battalion, basically. And we were just kind of stationed out in the desert. We weren't part of any base or anything.
Were you able to access the daily necessities of life as far as showers, and what were your conditions like?
Oh, we were. We built all of our own, actually. Built our own bathrooms, built our own showers, had our own water supplies shipped in by truck. So, yeah, we were very well provided for over there, and of course through everybody had MREs to eat, but the donations from all sorts of private companies came in, and we were pretty well taken care of. So, yeah.
Did you join the military out of patriotism, or did you join it as you just wanted to go in?
Well, out of high school, I really didn't have any direction at that time, really any idea. I certainly wasn't college bound at the time, and I knew I had to do something. And so I joined the military, and of course they give you a little bit for college so you can spend that on schooling. And that's where I was at age 18. So right out of high school, I was only out 2 weeks before I went into the Army. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about your jacket you have there?
Oh, sure. I don't even know if this uniform is the same Class A uniform anymore, because the uniforms have, I've been out of the Army for 20 years now, so I think that the uniforms have changed somewhat, but this was the Class A uniform when I got out in '97. And just some of the different emblems and such. I'm not sure if you can quite see these or anything with the U.S. And this is the Ordnance Corps, which I was a member of, and we repaired the TOW missile system, the TOW and the Dragon missile system. One of the TOW missiles being just a ground mount, the other one being mounted on the Bradley fighting vehicle, that was our main repair that we did over in Saudi Arabia, was everything that was mounted on the Bradley. this is called the French Fourragère cord. That's worn by the 3rd Infantry Division, which we were changed to the 1st ID, but then they told us, you guys can keep the Fourragère cord because you were originally part of the 3rd ID, and so that was that's how we ended up keeping that. For my rank, I was only an E4, but I was involved in quite a bit of things, and so as you can see here, I got a pretty decent amount of medals before I left. And so the top of this here being that's the Army Commendation Medal, which I have a few of those. Oak leaves mean you have more than one. Army Achievement Medal, Good Conduct Medal. This is the National Defense Service Medal. You have to forgive me, please. It's been 20 years.
No, it's good.
The Kuwait Liberation Medal for Operation Desert Storm. This is a Professional Development Ribbon, Army Service Ribbon, which is just a basic one that you get basically soon after you join. Overseas tours, which I had 2. This ribbon is for the defense of Saudi Arabia. And I'm sorry, this is Kuwait Liberation, this is Southwest Asia Service. And sharpshooter badge for rifle.
Can you tell us something that you would want to be remembered for from your time in the service?
That I want to be remembered for?
Yes.
In my younger days, of course, I had a lot more strength than I had now. You know, I had this nickname, the forklift, because at one time I carried something that was ridiculously heavy, and no one knew how I was able to do that. It was 3 50 caliber barrels, which if you've ever carried one, you couldn't imagine how I carried 3.
Well, I would just like to thank you for your time in the service and for your time for doing this interview, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Glad to have served.
My name is Matthew Roehm.
Okay. What was your rank in the service?
When I got out of service, I was a staff sergeant.
And what branch were you in?
U.S. Army.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time in the Army?
Sure. I went to basic and AIT in Fort Benning, Georgia. I stayed in Fort Benning for my first duty assignment. After that, I traveled to Germany and spent 32 months in Germany. Came back and was stationed at Fort Drum, New York. 5.5 years. I don't remember how long I was at Fort Drum, and then back down to Fort Benning again to serve as a drill instructor before I got out.
How many years did you serve in the Army?
Almost 11.
And you served during what time period?
I went in 1986. I served during the era of the first Gulf War. And I got out in 97, and between that period of time participated in Operation Restore Hope in Somalia and Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti.
Can you tell us a little bit about the conditions where you were deployed?
Well, the conditions always varied depending on where you're deployed to. The worst conditions I ever had to endure, I guess, was in the country of Somalia. We call it a country because they have a border and a flag, but not much else. No electricity, no running water. You had to wash your clothes by hand on a stone. So that was a little bit of a hardship as far as creature comforts go.
Can you tell us about a little lighthearted story that maybe comes to memory?
You know, when you're in the service, you see and do things that'll make you laugh your whole time in. One of the funniest things was we were on a night patrol in Somalia along the Juba River. We heard a noise that none of us had ever heard before, and it turned out to be a hippopotamus, and it came crashing out of the bush straight at us, and we scattered in every direction. And he ran straight into the river and splashed into the river. But, you know, it was the first time I ever felt like my life was in danger because of wildlife in a hostile area.
Did you go into the service as a patriotic duty, or did you just want to go in?
I entered the service after a whole life figuring that's what I'd do. Even as a child, I used to, you know, Halloween costumes were always military uniforms. I just knew it was something I was going to do. And I'm sure it has had a lot to do with the patriotism that my parents instilled in me.
What would you want to be remembered for your time in the service?
Of all the things I did while I was in the military, I think the most significant thing I did is I served as a drill instructor in Fort Benning, Georgia. I actually met some of the guys I trained over 20 years ago, and they thanked me for getting their career off to the right start. So I'd like to think that of all the things I did, I made good soldiers.
That's good. Well, I would just like to thank you for your time in the service and for your time right now that you have given us.
It was my pleasure to serve and my pleasure to do this for you.
Can you please state your name?
Richard Rhone.
Okay. Can you say what rank you were in?
I was in the United States Air Force. I attained the rank of Tech Sergeant.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time in the Air Force?
I entered the military in November of 1982, where I served in basic training and completed my tech school to become a security policeman in the United States Air Force. And then from there, I was stationed in Camp Bullis, which is right outside of San Antonio, and they trained us on infantry tactics, air-based ground defense, because I was being shipped to Germany, and we defended the Air Force base over there. I would serve the year in Germany in 1983 at Spangdahlem Air Force Base, and basically we had nuclear munitions there. We were in during the Cold War period, and we had 5 aircraft that were uploaded at all times with nuclear munitions on them, and I served with the pilots in this area for 3 days at a time. When the Russians would invade our airspace or any kind of international incident, we had to be ready to fly out at a moment's notice. So that was an interesting tour of duty, and then from there I went to Dover Air Force Base. My wife at the present time passed away while I was at Spangdahlem Air Base, and so I was reassigned to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, and I served there from 1984 until March of 1987. We were in charge of military airlift. It's also one of the largest military mortuaries on the East Coast. So any unfortunate soldiers that pass away overseas, they come through Dover Air Force Base. And from there, from March of 1987 until November of 1993, I was in the U.S. Air Force Reserves stationed at Willow Grove Naval Air Station, and we did many deployments out of there.
Can you tell us how the conditions were in the places that you were deployed to?
Well, San Antonio was hot. I remember going through basic and tech school and how hot it was, and that was during the winter and spring months. Germany wasn't too bad. It was just that we were always on alert all the time. When we would get a 3-day pass, a lot of the guys would leave the airbase because they would come knocking on your door at any moment, and we would have to suit up in flak vests and helmets and head down. We were in charge of protecting the inner perimeter of the base, and the Army was in charge of protecting the outer perimeter of the base. And then I was stationed at Dover, Delaware, where I met my present wife, Carol, through Sergeant Mike Popes, who was stationed there at the time.
Can you tell us why you wanted to go into the service?
I always felt a sense of patriotism. I wanted to serve in the military from the time I was a little boy. My grandfather had served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and for the longest time I wanted to go into the Navy, but as I became older and when I was a senior in high school, an Air Force recruiter came, and I really got an interest in going into the Air Force. I had a great uncle who served in the Army Air Force and was actually shot down during World War II over Germany and safely made it back to France. And then I had another great uncle who served in the Marine Corps. He was actually involved in the second wave during Iwo Jima. He basically went in and they had to pick up Marines and take their bodies back to the ship, which he said was a pretty horrific scene. But from those stories and family members being and serving in the military, I always wanted to serve my country. And I do remember one deployment when I was in the reserves, when we were training to go to the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. We spent some time in the desert in Nevada, which was very hot during the day and cold at night. I actually didn't get deployed to Saudi Arabia during the first Gulf War. I actually was called up to fill in at Willow Grove for the regular Navy and airmen that actually went over to Saudi Arabia in 1991.
Can you tell us what do you want to be remembered for from your time in the service?
Just that I served my country faithfully, and I served my country so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have today, freedoms of being able to worship freely on Sunday, freedoms that everyday Americans maybe take for granted, but having served in the military and understanding the threat that surrounds America, I just hope to be remembered by the freedoms that I helped protect.
Is there any lighthearted story you want to tell when you were in the service?
There's many stories that I could tell. I just remember a lot of great times. I made a lot of lifelong friendships with a lot of airmen that served with me, and I made a lot of lifelong friendships. The military had a big part in my salvation. I actually got saved when I was 12 years old, and when my first wife passed away, I actually went away from the Lord for a period of time. And when my grandmother passed away, a lot of men that were saved in the military had a big influence, especially Mike Popes, and helping me get back to the Lord and serving Him and where I'm at today.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for serving in the military and for your time now.
Thank you.
Can you please state your name?
Yeah, it's Russell Young.
Okay. What was your rank in the service?
In the Navy, I was an airman, and in the Army, I was sergeant first class.
Like you said, you were in the Navy and the Army. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My first tour was in the Navy. I signed up when I was actually in high school, went in the Naval Reserve, got mobilized in May of '64, and sent overseas. Wound up in the Caribbean for 2 years. Dealt with the San Domingo crisis down there and other things that were going on within the Caribbean. And then with the Army, I had a break in service when I got out of the Navy, went back in the Army in '74 Army Reserves. Then went back active duty in '78 with the Army. I was a combat engineers, and I wound up doing recruiting duty. And enlisted, and then back into the medical field of recruiting doctors and nurses for the Army, active and reserves.
Can you tell us where you have been stationed, or like what ship you have been on?
Yeah, I was stationed in Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico with the Navy, Viegas, and within that area. And then with the Army, I was stationed stateside mostly with the Army in 79th ARCOM and the 330th Engineer Battalion out of Willow Grove, and then active duty with Recruiting Command. And I was with stationed in Philadelphia, down in Maryland, DC area. So I tri-state area I covered for recruiting duty. And then with the 1st AMID detachment out of Fort Meade, Maryland.
How were the conditions of where you were deployed?
Well, I enjoyed it. I had no problem with it. I was stationed overseas in the Caribbean. It was great. No problem. I thought it was going to be something different, but the only situation we had was San Domingo crisis, and that was only short-lived with them, I'd say.
Can you tell us any stories of when you were in the Army or Navy?
Depends how you mean stories. I mean,
Yeah.
most of it. I volunteered when I was in the Navy. I volunteered to go to Nam, and they told me I was crazy when I volunteered for it. And then I had the opportunity of either re-enlisting or getting out. I got out of the Navy, so I was fortunate enough. Actually, somebody from Faith Baptist Church that I went to basic with in the Navy. His mom kept sending me tracts and kept praying for me, So I didn't actually get saved until 74 or 72, excuse me, of September actually. And but it was through them that I got to know the Lord. And with the Army, it was just trying to hold your testimony with them in the recruiting command with stuff that was going on. So there's a lot of headaches with recruiting because you dealt with a lot of younger kids that really didn't care about anything. But when I got in the medical field, that was more interesting because you dealt with professionals there. So my whole thing with the recruiting command was the fact that you had these quotas you had to meet, and they would always come back to me wanting to know, why I wasn't doing anything each month or so forth. I'd always would tell them that it's not the end of the year yet. When it's over, then you can say something to me. But I usually wound up being top with recruiting for anesthesia program and some of the other fields from medical.
Did you enlist out of a patriotic standpoint, or did you enlist just because you wanted to go in?
My gut feeling when I decided to enlist when I was in high school, so my senior year of high school is when I enlisted in the Naval Reserve. And actually, the family, my dad was Navy. I had a couple uncles that were in the Army and the Navy. Matter of fact, one of my namesakes, my first name's after my Uncle Russell. He served in the Navy in the Atlantic, so he had some action there during the war. But yeah, I basically enlisted to, I felt as though my brother might wind up getting drafted. He was older than me, and I figured I'd maybe go in and skip over him. And yeah, they did skip over him.
Was the draft going on at the time?
The draft was going on at that time. Matter of fact, when I was active duty with the Navy overseas, I got a draft notice. And I didn't turn my draft card in when I left. So, but they were still drafting those guys who were in. They just didn't make the right connection. So, but yeah, I did out of patriotic, I guess you might say.
What do you want to be remembered for?
I'm sorry, say again?
What do you want to be remembered for from your time of service?
That's a rough one. A lot of people I've dealt with have just, appreciate the fact the way I handled them in going into the service. It's being truthful with them about the stuff. I talked most people out of joining than I did in joining, but yet I still met the numbers I needed to meet for it because I guess God just looked at it that way. So I just served this country.
That's good. Well, I would just like to thank you for your time in the service and your time right now. And
No problem. You're welcome. Anytime.
Can you please state your name?
Yes, my name is Jay for Joseph, Michael Popst.
Okay. What was your rank in the military?
I was Staff Sergeant when I departed.
What was your branch of service?
United States Air Force.
The years you served?
I served from 1983 till 1992.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed for my whole time at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware.
And were you deployed anywhere?
Yes, several deployments. Earlier in my Air Force career, I took trips to Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, the capital, for a period of 6 months.
Can you tell us how it was there?
Very hot.
Yeah.
Very hot, naturally. It wasn't bad. People were very friendly, cordial, and it was okay.
Which of the wars did you serve during?
Desert Storm, the Gulf War. Went to Saudi Arabia, Dhahran Air Base.
When you went into the military, did you want to go in for patriotism, or did you feel like it was your duty to go?
No, I actually didn't do it for patriotism. My house situation wasn't good with the family, and so I really needed to get away. And my Uncle Bob told me about the Air Force, and he kind of led me to it, and I'm glad he did.
What would you want to be remembered for in your years of service?
That I gave my best.
And can you show us what you have there?
Yes, I brought, this is my original 1983 plaque when I first went in. I have it, I had to dust it off a little bit. This is a picture of Desert Storm before the war took place, when we were relaxing a little bit. That was for several months when we first got there. And this is special. This is a picture of Catherine, my wife, and Jacqueline when I got home the first morning from Desert Storm. She was a baby at that point.
Now, I remember you sharing with us before when your deployment to Saudi Arabia had something to do with your spiritual salvation. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
I sure will, Brother Rich. I went there. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I didn't know anything about the Bible, and while we were over there in Desert Storm, we had time on our hands in the beginning, and I was invited to Bible studies. As a matter of fact, the one who was leading it is a close friend of our pastor now. His name was Jeff Brown. He was also stationed with us, and he invited me to a Bible study. And I didn't come to know the Lord personally at that point, but as I was reading and reading and reading, I came to realize that Jesus was more than a man. He had to be for what he did, but I didn't come to faith while in the desert. It was when I came home one night. I was watching TV, a preacher by the name of Ben Hayden, and he gave the gospel. What a message he gave, and it broke me down. And I cried like a baby. I'm not afraid to say that. And at that point, I came to know Christ as my Savior. And there was no turning back after that.
And what era did you say you served in again?
I served from 1983 to 1992.
Well, we'd just like to thank you for your time in the service, and thank you for your time now. And I hope you have a nice day.
Thank you.
State your name.
I'm sorry,
Can you please say your name?
Jones, Paul Jones,
What was your rank in the military?
Sergeant.
What was your rank in the military?
Yeah,
Sergeant.
Speak up a little bit because I'm using hearing aids,
Oh, yeah.
so
He said sergeant.
Sergeant, okay.
yeah.
What was your branch of service?
Army.
Army.
Maybe walk a little closer
Yeah.
to him.
What years did you serve from? What years did you serve from?
From 1948 to 1951.
Where were you stationed?
Well, I started out in over here in this country, then I ended up in Japan and Korea. So I had more service overseas than I had in
United
in
States.
the zone of what they call the ZI, the zone of interior.
Okay.
So that's what you do. You end up,
Yeah.
I will, and you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean.
Yep. The Air Force sent me to Germany 3 times.
How many?
3.
Could they get you enough over there? And it's just like, is my understanding that Matt is going back over?
Yes.
Why?
February 26th. I can talk to you after we get done.
Okay, but I'm questioning why he has to go again.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conditions
Mhm.
on sending guys overseas now. I know I went over because I was not
Mhm.
a male sole surviving son,
Yeah.
but I know there are conditions where
Mhm.
if an individual like my stepbrother
Mhm.
was the sole surviving son
Mhm.
of my stepmother, so he could not be sent overseas
Okay.
because that meant that the lifeline would be cut off.
Okay.
So they have to be particular about doing that. But anyhow, that's what I did. I spent most of my time in, actually more, I spent 2 years in Korea and a year in Japan.
And you served during what war or era? You served during
What era? Like I served during the Cold War,
No, this is Korean War.
Korean War.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me the conditions like that you were in Korea and Japan?
Your conditions, what were they like? Was it hot? Was it a lot of bugs?
Depends on which one you were in. In Japan, they were just rebuilding from the war. And in Korea, there wasn't much there to rebuild, but they survived with what they had. They didn't have no fancy buildings or places. Well, they had some, but they were like government buildings. In fact, what was amazing was we were just north of Seoul, and the Korea University, it's just north of there. It's a big, beautiful building. If you didn't know you were in Korea, you'd think you were back in the States because it was so well made. It was made like, you know, a university with all the stuff that goes with it, and unbelievable. While I was there, they had kind of a, I don't know, like a USO club or some kind of a place where the guys could hang out. And wouldn't you know, here we are, and I ran into the kid that lived down the road from me when I was working on a farm before I went to Korea. I mean, I couldn't believe it. There's like 200 or 300 guys in there. And all of a sudden I see this kid, I said, whoa, what are you doing here? He says, what are you doing here? I said, well, we're all here together. You know? He had his own Jeep where he could putt around, you know. But it was just so amazing that, you know, here we are 3,000 miles apart from when we were back home. And there he is, you know. But war does strange things, you know. And it just blows your mind that you could run into somebody that you just saw in high school. And I left high school, and I don't know whether he finished or not, but anyhow, we both ended up in the service. You know? So we were the typical 19-year-olds. You know, no place to go, so join the service. You have a lot of places to go. So that's where we ended up. It was amazing. But yeah, the living style is like primitive. When we were there, they did the best they could with what they had. People just lived, they existed on what they could get, you know. Can't say, you know, we can comment on the government and all that thing because it was all tore up, you know. It was just war going on. It was just what we did see that was disturbing, but it happens every time, probably over in the Middle East too, is people evacuating. They would just form miles of just people walking away from the war, just going into like wherever they could get to, and you'd see them for miles, and sometimes for days you'd see people leaving. And it was really bad when we were in North Korea, because when we were in North Korea and we had to get out of there, that's when we saw the refugees. I mean, they were desperate. They wanted to get out of North Korea, and they would almost do anything. They brought tanks in to calm the people down and get them under control, and they did get a hold of some landing ship tank, their LST style ships, or their in a similar vein, they had where they could put them on board, and they just put the people, let them get on. They were not going to, but then at the last minute the Chinese were coming in behind them. They had no place to go, and we were getting out of there because we had a place to go. They didn't. So it was like desperate times.
Wow.
They just wanted to leave. They knew the Chinese we're not going to treat them well.
Yeah.
You know? And then there was, at a point, there was also bad blood between the Koreans and the Japanese, because the Japanese occupied Korea for a long period of time, and a lot of Koreans learned how to speak Japanese, and vice versa, you know, so they could get by. But for the people, the hard part was seeing children, seeing little kids, and their moms were desperate. Their dads probably had been sent to war to fight. So it was just usually mom and the kids all gathered around together, and they would take anything they could get their hands on, unless you kind of watched out for them. Then they got a reputation of stealing. Well, was it stealing, or was it just borrowing until they got back on their feet? You know, so you had a job to do. So you still were doing your job, but you saw this because you couldn't escape from it. I mean, it's like a big picture, and you're part of it, but you're looking at what's happening, and you can't do anything other than what you're told to do. You know, at that time we were evacuating everything we could out of there, and they were getting ready to blow up the harbor, which they did, you know. So that was nasty.
I heard that the winters were very harsh in Korea. Is that true? The winters?
Winter.
Yeah.
Oh, well, like Mike Gross, he was in the Navy,
Okay.
and he told me, as I told him, I was never so cold in my life.
Yeah.
And he was on board ship most of the time, but we were on land. But the Army wasn't prepared for
That's what I heard.
what happened.
Yeah.
It happened so fast. It's just like a lot of guys got pulled out of Japan. They were like occupation troops, and they were shiny boot guys.
Yeah.
Shine their shoes up and keep their helmets shiny. Well, that's a good target, you know.
Yeah.
So these guys were not ready, you know, and when they came in there and took over. So it was the same story. Nobody was ready, so we did not have winter gear.
Yeah.
When we were in North Korea, we had old army blanket to put to sleep in.
Yeah.
Just
A blanket, a regular
a
blanket.
blanket.
Yeah.
Zipped up. That's all it was.
Mm.
So it was a very thin, a wool blanket. To
Yeah.
keep you warm to a degree, but not when it's 20 below or
No.
things like that.
Yeah.
So we kind of got through. A lot of guys got frostbite.
Yeah.
Really bad cases of frostbite. Hands, feet, and I know. I thank the Lord that I didn't. I was able to have enough socks to keep my feet dry and warm.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. You know,
Yeah.
and if you can't change them, you know, your feet suffer from it.
Yeah.
So and then there was strange things they had, believe it or not. They had in this building we were housed in for a while, they had a big copper kettle that they took a bath in.
Oh.
So we would get some water in there and put a fire under it. You had to be careful getting in a hot tub with
Yeah.
that kind of situation.
Yeah.
But it was a blessing because you know it was so cold and you could be so hot, you know. But it was, well, war's a strange thing.
Yeah.
You run into circumstances that you would never
Think of.
in a lifetime. And you're in a strange country. They had different cultures, and you kind of like floating on top. You don't know which way to go, and you kind of just go with the flow because what else are you going to do? You know? So it's a strange time. Now I know you're not looking to go into service, are you? Never. And but your age is about the age that young men do think about going into service. Well,
I went in at 17, yeah.
Yeah, right.
My parents had to sign for me to go in. Because my parents had to sign for me to go in.
Well, that's what my dad.
Because I graduated high school at 17. And so they had to sign the paperwork so I could.
17 and I'm gone.
Yeah.
And you know, everything starts out normal. What you expect normal in the service, but
Yeah.
it's still a different world.
Mhm.
And then I only went in for 2 years.
Okay.
But when Joe Stalin told
Mhm.
the people in North Korea to attack Seoul, that's what they did.
Mhm.
So that started the war. So we got orders. If you're going to be discharged within the year, you're extended for another year. So they thank you very much, Joe. You know, so he kept us in the service.
So you were longer than 2 years.
For 1 year longer.
So you were 3 years in the Army.
Yeah, I was 3 years.
Okay.
I started for 2 and I ended up with 3.
Okay.
So that's what war does. And there's what they call, you know, it's just special circumstances. Well, I guess it is when you're getting your head blown off.
Yeah.
You know, whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Seoul was so close to North Korea
Mhm.
that it didn't take them long
Right.
to get across the 38th parallel
Yeah.
and raise havoc. And that's
Yeah.
what they did. And then they got all the way down to Busan.
Mhm.
And there's nobody there to hold them back. You
Mhm.
know, and couldn't get enough troops. We were in our outfit in Fort Benning. They pulled out all kind of groups. They pulled out a tank battalion. They pulled out infantry regiment, specialty companies, and they broke up the whole division. You know, so we're thinking, oh, we're all right here. We're not going to do anything. No. The Army's way ahead of you. Don't even think you're going to beat them at it. So there was a 7th Infantry Regiment up in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, so we brought them down. Then they got the 65th Infantry Regiment from Panama and Puerto Rico. So we had 3 regiments. We had and then they went to Fort Hood and got a tank battalion. Oh, they can get them everywhere. you
Yeah.
know. So they just put us all together and they called us the 3rd Division. So
Okay.
we went. We were a division. So that made Harry Truman and MacArthur happy because he needed troops desperate. He was really desperate for troops. So that's what we ended up doing. And then here's the thing too. It was pretty nice if you're going to call it that. And before the war started, we the whole division went to Puerto Rico for maneuvers.
Yeah, that's what
Oh,
Mr. Rush Young was telling us to ask you about.
it was getting us ready to go
Yeah.
overseas
Yeah.
and get engaged in combat.
Mhm.
So they had these, you know, bad guys and good guys, and that's what they would do. They would just play war. Only it wasn't really play all the time because a lot of times we had a lot of shells and stuff going off. They brought in a whole division of paratroopers and dropped them in Puerto Rico. So we saw it. We had all the actions and things going on of like combat. So you kind of got ready so that in June, when it did happen, you were not that shocked that you were going overseas. You're going to be dumped off in the middle of nowhere. And you know the strange thing too, RJ, is when you get on board the ship, and like in Norfolk, we were going in and out of like Norfolk and Charleston, South Carolina. Well, when you get on the ship, you went up a ramp. So when you're on the ship, how are you going to get off? Well, you don't jump.
They lower you in the boat?
No. They use nets.
Oh, yeah, to
Go
climb.
over to the side of the ship,
Mhm.
and they got these nets hanging down. And you
Climb.
go down the net and get into a smaller boat. And I'm thinking like, Oh boy, I ain't gonna swim all that. So they said, no, we got nets for you, so you just go over the side, you know. And here I am, I weigh about 120 pounds, and you gotta hold the nets.
Yeah.
And you got all these guys going down the net, getting in, and they're bigger guys than you are, and you're holding the net, and the net is actually going up and down because you're on the waves, and the boat's doing the same thing. So you're grabbing the net, and then you're letting it go, and you're grabbing it and letting it go. And it was just strange, but it was an experience. So you just have to learn what you gotta do. Sometimes you have to learn on the moment that you're doing it. This is what you have to do, you know. So we learned that in a hurry, you know. So then we got on shore, and we did our war game, which they rated everybody in the war games. They had umpires there, and actually our little outfit, we all got killed. So
I've been in those war games too. Now, did you join the military out of patriotism, or you were drafted, or desperation? Okay. All right.
Well, I was living with. I was not living at home. I went on a farm when I was 15. Went to school when I was on the farm, and then I got close to graduation, and I could see I couldn't afford graduation, so I quit school and ended up going to my sisters, and my brother-in-law said, well, you ought to go down to a recruiting station and talk to somebody down there. So he kept pressuring me to do that. So I figured, well, what else am I gonna do? I couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
Just not even figured, and I didn't even have a social security number.
Huh.
You know, so I'm looking all over it. I went to a delicatessen,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to do that. I says, ooh, I can't do this. You know, cut meat for people and do that. And, no, I can't do that. And just off a farm, you know,
Yeah.
shoveling
Horse manure and
manure
and
for
hay
hours and days. And now I'm
my
gonna
great grandfather had a farm,
I'm gonna
so
cut delicatessen for stuff. I don't think so. So anyhow, it was a matter of that. And once I get into service, you know, all those questions were answered. I had a place to sleep, food to eat, and it's something to do. You know, so you sign up. Yes, I will. So that's how it kind of. I guess people call it evolve. I don't believe it. I don't like that word.
yeah. It's how the
Things
situation worked out.
changed.
Yeah.
Things didn't evolve. They changed.
Yeah. Your situation in life changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ended up in the service, and then you know I did that. Well, then I got discharged. I stayed in Japan for another year. I worked as a civilian for the Army, so I didn't wear a uniform. I dressed up and wear civilian clothes, but I was under Army control.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
but I had a lot of freedom. I mean, and the amazing thing, I watched something just recently, and back then they had arrangements where if you were a civilian, you could rent a brand new Army car for 50 cents an hour and go somewhere.
Wow.
Brand new.
Now, what years did you exactly serve? From 1948?
48 until I served until the end of November of 51.
51. Okay.
And I changed from military with a uniform to a civilian under military control. So they have the jobs now. They have them in Washington a lot. You know. So that's and some guy just came into barracks. We were in Camp Drake, and he said, "You're gonna call me Mister tomorrow." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "No, I'm gonna get discharged." I said, "Oh, yeah." So we went talk. So found out what to do, where to go, and papers to fill out, and I qualified, so I got a job. But that was after I actually in Korea. I had my third appendicitis attack.
Oh.
I had my first one at Fort Knox. The second one I had in Korea, I didn't even go on sick leave. And the third one, I says, They ain't getting away with this one. This is the third time. I'm going to get my appendix out. So I went in like October, and by November I was discharged. But that's what they did. I mean, how are you going to live with my niece who lives in Dayton, Ohio? Hers burst on her. She's alive, thank God. But if it burst on you, it can
kill you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's serious. So,
What kind of symptoms were you having?
pain, throwing up. You just knew something was wrong. And the first time, I didn't know what was happening. They didn't either. I waited 3 hours for an ambulance in Fort Knox, and then when I got to the hospital, they gave me antibiotics, and they gave me penicillin on one cheek, and then the other cheek until they cleared it up, and then I went back to duty. And in Korea, it happened the second time. I knew what it was, because I had the same symptoms. You know something's seriously wrong. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So I passed that one, got through that one, just by waiting for the time for it to clear up. But the third time I said, no. And the strange thing is, Rich, is when you go on sick leave and you leave everything. I went on sick call. I never saw the guys, never saw any of my personal possessions. All the time I was in there in the hospital. I went from one hospital all the way back. From the hospital that's in MASH.
Yeah.
First evacuation. That's a real hospital.
Yeah.
That's where I had my appendix out.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I ended up going from one hospital, kept going back toward Busan, which is the end of Korea. And then I went from there. They put me in a hospital in Japan, and I wasn't qualified for duty. They have some kind of a rating by numbers.
Right.
You have to have all one.
They have the numbers, to be able to report for duty.
Be ready for combat duty. So I wasn't ready. So and I was due for discharge. So that worked out.
Yeah.
I didn't think far enough ahead, but that's another story. But I had my appendix out, and then I got discharged, and then I got changed into civilian, and that was a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
I had, like I said, Army control, but I had a lot of freedom. I had weekends off and stuff like that. No, we had Wednesday afternoon off, and we worked Saturday morning. So we worked 6 days. But that's what was happening there. And something else happened. And that year I got sleeping sickness and almost lost my life. So
Oh.
I decided it's time to get out of Japan and get back home.
Yeah.
I got back home. But overall, I'd say, RJ, military life is full of surprises. Full of surprises.
Never volunteer for anything, I was always told.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
Rich. And the old story is they tell you to hurry up and wait.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you do. You
Yeah.
stand outside of a barracks or an office building in service, and you wait. And you wait. And
Hurry up and wait.
Then finally, they'll take care of you. And then they want you out because you've been there too long anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and you learn what life is like on board ship.
Yeah.
I sailed a lot of waves. After being an Army guy, I spent about 3 months on board ship.
Because they didn't fly you over, they took you over by ship then.
Huh?
They took you over by ship back then.
Yeah, there was no planes, no
Yeah.
crew. And that year, 1950, we traveled 12,700 miles without one bit of it being in the air. On trains, trucks,
And boats.
buses, and Army trucks, and Army trucks, and Army trucks, and Army trucks, and we kept going. Every time you picked up and moved, you went from one station.
Yeah.
And Korea was either dusty or it rained.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it got really windy. You could hang. That's how it is. And when there was a storm coming up or something, you could lay in your cot and you could hear the wind coming down those mountains. Like just terrible winds just coming down there. The people, I don't know how they really knew how to treat us, because we were there to help them, but they just saw everything being torn up, and you know, their life was made miserable. Their kids were crying. They didn't have nothing to eat. People didn't either, you know. And so one time, we thought we were going to be smart and have some fresh vegetables. So we went out in somebody's garden and we ripped up some food, celery or something like that. Anyhow, we cleaned it all up and we took a bite of it, and that was, we remembered how they're fertilized. You know, so it's not fertilized like here, it's their way. So we just decided, and the best thing we ever did was to find fresh eggs that belonged to somebody else that we enjoyed, because we had nothing but powdered eggs and even powdered milk. You know, plus our rations, we had a lot of rations. You know, so yeah, and you walked almost everywhere. Got around and did everything you walked around. And you know, we all had our weapons. We had it set up for them before we left to go overseas. We had to what they call it, reintroduce ourselves to using the weapon. Because my job was not infantry, but you had to be ready for infantry. So your basic training means that's it. You're basically taught how to defend yourself. And when we got to North Korea, my single item that really got me into the whole thing going to where it war was when we were on patrol, and that sniper missed my ear by about an inch. And I did the bullet just whizzing past by, and stupidly, I didn't know how to sniper. I just told him. Somebody just missed my ear by that much. His ear.
Wow.
Sniper in the ear. But you know, we were people used to paperwork. We had to be able to take the weapon and go out and do what you're told. Go on patrol. You know, look for the enemy. And the last thing that was really a true lesson in warfare was when they sent us out on a roadblock, which was definitely something that you don't want to do. In other words, there's a bridge, even a small bridge, compared to this, going across a creek or whatever. And so we had 4 groups of guys. Each corner of the bridge had a group of guys and a machine gun. So the only thing out front of us was the Chinese. So, and we hear they were coming. So we had to defend that bridge.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what it was. So, and that was cold and nasty, and we had to, during the day before we settled down for the night, we had to, we found a bunch of Koreans who looked like they were, you know, combat age men. You know, and they're wandering around, so we ended up shaking them down for weapons and making sure they didn't have any, but they were all around the area. So but later on toward the evening, I saw these guys walking on the other side of the creek. There were about 6 or 7 of them. I got ready to blow them away. I had my weapon, I had the safety off, my finger was on the trigger, and somebody hollered, "No, don't shoot," you know. And then I saw one of our guys behind them was guiding them in, but I didn't know what they were doing. But they all wear these white uniforms, like, you know, like you can't, of course it's good in the wintertime, you can't see them.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise you see them. The do whatever they want to do. And then we got a hold of them. They went to get firewood for us, you know, but a roadblock is a roadblock.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. It's the line in the sand.
Yeah.
You go that far and no further, and that's it.
Well, me and RJ would like to thank you for your service and your time, and thank you for doing this interview with us.
Can't get away.
And appreciate everything you've done. RJ, is there any one little final thing you want to say?
What is one thing that you would want to be remembered for from your time of service?
What's one thing that you would like to be remembered for as your time in service, that you served your country?
That I served my country honorably,
Honorably, yeah.
and I was rewarded. I got the Bronze Star for meritorious.
Okay.
service. And when I left Tokyo, I got a certificate of meritorious. I wanted to do my job.
Yeah.
I wanted to do the best I could at all times. I
Mhm.
mean, that's what the Lord teaches us to do anyhow.
Yeah.
Don't just slough off and
Yeah.
try to get away with stuff. Do what you're called to do.
Mhm.
Do it to the best of your ability.
Mhm.
Don't hold back your services, because
Right.
this is where
Cost
you're
somebody their life. Someone else, your buddy. Now, did you come to faith in Christ before or after your service
at.
time?
I was saved before that.
Okay.
As a child.
Okay.
Yes. It was years before that.
Okay.
During the Depression.
Okay.
And that's a story by itself.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you for the time that you've given us here for the interview, and appreciate you, and thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah, it's
Martin Solar,
And what rank were you in?
boatswain mate, second class.
Okay. Your branch of service?
United States Navy, 5th Amphibious Forces.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
About the amphibious forces, well, we worked with the Marines most of the times. We would take them into the beaches and bring them in supplies. We were on landing craft, and that was our job. We fought on land and sea. That's what amphibious is.
Okay. Let's see. Where did you serve? Like
I served in the Pacific, South Pacific.
years? What years did you serve?
I went in 43 and came out in 46. 3 years.
Okay. Did you serve during what war did you serve during?
World War II, naturally. Yeah.
Were you combat or non-combatant?
Yes, I was combat. 5 different battles.
Can we know which ones they were? Or
Sure. I started in the Marshall Islands. That was on Kwajalein.
okay.
And then there was Eniwetok, also in the Marshall Islands. And then from there, I went to Saipan.
Okay.
That's in the Marianas. And then we went to Tinian, which is also in the Marianas. And then from there to Iwo Jima. And from Iwo Jima to Okinawa. That's the battles I was in.
Go ahead, you can answer.
So can you tell us about your conditions on like the ship and about life in the Navy and
You mean on the islands?
yes.
Well, when we got on the islands, you know, they were being shelled for like a week, 2 weeks at a time. And all the civilians were hiding. They were hiding in caves and whatever. You didn't see most of them. And then on the other islands, mostly on Saipan, they had told the civilians there that the Americans were going to kill them all. So what they did, they went around to the other side of the island, we called it Suicide Cliff, and the civilians were just jumping off the cliffs and committing suicide. It was a horrible sight to see. Horrible sight to see. But then when we finally got to talk to them, they cooperated. There was no problem with them.
When did you enlist?
When did I enlist?
Yes.
I enlisted in 1943 when I was 17.
Okay. Why did you enlist?
Why did you enlist? Well, the story is, in 1941, when they bombed Pearl Harbor, I have a older brother that was 3 years older than me. He was 18. And the day after Pearl Harbor, he said he was going to enlist. So I went with him. I thought, if he's going to enlist, I'm going to enlist too. I was only 15. So he went up there and he signed in, and I was standing behind him, and I went over and I was going to sign in, and my brother turned around and said, don't you take him, he's only 15. So I waited. I had to wait till I was 17. And then a month after I was 17, I enlisted. And that was in 43, March of 43. And then I had 6 weeks of boot camp, 1 week leave, back to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, got on a boat or a ship overseas right away. And I spent 2.5 years in the Pacific, almost 3 years.
What do you want to be remembered for?
Pardon?
What do you want to be remembered for?
What do I be remembered for? Well, my time in the service. I mean, I helped a lot of people there. I took a lot of wounded out. And, well, see, I was on the small boats. And there was one occasion where we shot down a pilot and I picked him up in the small boat. I went over and picked him up. And I took him back to the boat for questioning. And I was standing guard over him. And while I was standing guard over him, he spoke English like you would speak English. He went to the University of California. He was a pilot, and it was the early part of the war, you know. And then at Saipan, I picked up another pilot that was shot down, and I guarded him. And that was the same thing. Spoke American, and if you want to see it, while I was standing guard over them, I had talked to both of them, and I asked them if they would sign their name in Japanese and in English, and where we shot them down, where I picked them up. I still have the card if you want to see it.
Yeah, sure. That would be great.
Lasted 36 days. And on our boat, there were 16 in the crew. I was on an LCT. And we had no food. You know, we had food for 6 days and that was it. That's how long it was supposed to last. So the only way we could get food, when we went up on the beach, we would, from the dead Marines, we'd take C rations or K rations or whatever. Or if we went to unload a merchant ship, we'd pull up alongside them and say, we're not going to unload you unless you feed us first. So that's the way we got our meals. And the merchant Marines, they wanted to get out of the battle zone as fast as possible. So they would feed us.
Can you tell me what you did?
My wife was a nurse. And she went through the Navy Cadet Corps. And I met her a month before she graduated. And she had a choice to go into the service or not go into the service because the war had ended when she graduated. It was in 1946 when I met her when I came out. And after, well, it's a long story if you want to hear it, really. Her father's brother lived next door to us. And I was recently home from the Navy, and they were going on a picnic. I was very friendly with those people. And they were going on a picnic, and they said, Marty, you want to come with us? And I said, not really, I'm going to go out with the boys. He said, come on, I'll introduce you to my niece. Well, when we got there, I was in the water, and they walked past us, and he waved to me, and my wife, Laura, she said, well, who was that you waved to in the water? And he said, oh, that's my neighbor. He said, well, why didn't you introduce me? Well, we got introduced, and I spent the rest of the day with her. She started to swim across the lake. She said, you want to swim across the lake? And halfway across, she started to go under. So I had to pull her to the other side of the lake. And then at the end of the day, I looked at her and I pointed my finger to her. I said, Dolores, someday I'm going to marry you. And she looked at me very nonchalantly and she said, okay. And our third date, we were engaged. 3 months later, we were married. We eloped and got married. And then after a couple of months. I mean, we tried to keep it a secret, but it was in the paper and they found out. Then my father made us a wedding. We had to have another wedding. So
How long you were married?
we were married 66 years. And the last 8 years, you know, she had dementia. And I took care of her for the 8 years. Kept her at home, wouldn't put her away. Was by her bedside when she died. And I knew the night she was going to go, I knew, and I sat up with her all night. And during the day, I knew she was about to go, and I leaned beside her. I had seen death so many times, so I knew her legs were turning blue, and I knelt beside her, and I just whispered in her ear. I said, "Dolores, honey, it's okay." I said, "Let it go. The Lord's waiting for you. Take his hand. It's okay. It's all right with me. Just let it go." And she didn't open her eyes, but they say the last thing that goes is the hearing, really. And she just gave one deep breath, and she let it go. I think she really was waiting for me to say, "It's okay." I was used to boats. I mean, when I was a kid, I couldn't have been more than 10, 12 years old. I bought my first outboard motor. It was a 1.3 Firestone. I still remember it. And to me, to go out on a boat, because I was fishing, I was always out somewhere. But when we left New York, we went around the Horn and we hit a storm. I mean, a bad storm. And it was mostly all new recruits, and everyone was sick. Everyone was seasick. And we went through the Panama Canal, and we stopped on the other side, and we all had a liberty in Balboa.
Okay.
And then from there we went, but the water was really rough going around the Horn. Everyone was sick. And then we pulled into Oahu. That was our home base. And then from there, I mean, we used to practice. We would go to Maui a lot and practice landings at Maui, because then there was nothing there. There was no hotels. There was a beautiful, beautiful beach there. And from there, we would go to Kauai and practice landings there. And when we would go on an invasion, see, our boat was only 137 feet. They would load us on to an LST. They got a crane and lowered it, put us on an LST, which is the real bigger one. And when we got to our objective, they would flood their tanks and side launches off the boat. And that's the way we got there. And from there, I mean, it was short distance to the other places, so we could go by ourselves. But the water, and sometimes there, the water was so bad that I thought we were going to split in half. We had a lot of rough weather, especially around Iwo Jima. It was really bad weather there.
And what time of the year did you hit the islands? Was it summer?
Let me think now. It was in February is when we hit the islands. And it was, let me see, I marked it down here.
I'm going to have you repeat that again.
It lasted from February 16th to the 29th of March. It was 36 days altogether.
Okay.
That's how long we stayed there. Okay. And from there, we went to Okinawa, and I was there for a while. We didn't have much. I didn't do much there, but on Iwo Jima, we used to pick up. We take supplies into the beaches and men into the beaches, and then we'd pick up wounded and take them up to the hospital ships.
Okay.
That was our duty, and we were on 24-hour call all the time. We worked in different shifts. There were 16 in the crew and 1 officer. That was our crew.
Now, are there any remaining alive from your unit that you're in touch with that you know of?
I don't think so. I think I was the youngest one. There was one other fellow who I was very friendly with. He was 18 and I was 17 when I was on there. And he was from Brooklyn, New York. The rest of them from all Southerners, all from the South. We were the only 2 from the North. And when I came home, I was speaking like a southerner. I picked up the accent. Being with them so long. Yeah, I'll show you pictures of the boat if you want to see what I was on. And if you want to borrow it, see, this is the boat I was on.
Okay.
That's my boat. Now, see, I drove these. These are the smaller boats. Before I got onto this, I was on a bigger boat, and I drove the LCVPs and the LCMs. And then I was transferred when we were going to Iwo Jima. They let me off in Hawaii, and I got aboard this boat, and that's when I went to those two ones.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of pictures in here. See, here's your LST. This is the LST right here. That's the bigger one. Or is this? No, that's an LSD. Here's the LST. This is an LCI. This is an LST, and that's an LSD. That's a bigger boat. You could pull into there. When we got shot up one time, we pulled into there, and they patched up the holes and pumped the water out. And send us on our way, yeah. That's a landing ship dock is what that is. But that's the boats. And there's pictures in here. If you want to borrow them, it's fine. There's all kinds of pictures in here.
Just have you state that for us and then go ahead.
So can you know why you enlisted? Is it out of patriotism or anything else like that?
Yes, it was out of patriotism, and my brother was in the service, and I just couldn't wait to get into the service. I thought I was going to go over to the other side, to Germany, but they shipped me in the Pacific. And my brother was wounded real bad too, so that was another reason.